now. So,
Richard.
Jovita, over to you.
Thank you. So our next speaker and last in today, all the today's sessions, but you have to listen to him because last is not least, you know. Richard Yonck is a very well-known futurist with Intelligent Future Consulting in Seattle. He is an advisor to businesses and organizations about emerging trends and future developments. Richard's new book, Future Minds, which I highly recommend to you to read, explores the nature of intelligence and how our world is rapidly becoming more and differently intelligent. As an international keynote speaker, Richard explores developing trends in emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, healthcare, biotechnology, and genetics. And Richard advises clients ranging from global Fortune 500 companies such as Amazon or Samsung and Xerox. So Richard is formerly the computing and AI contributing editor for the Futurist magazine, a member of the Association of Professional Futurists and the National Association of Science Writers. So Richard will tell us about, it will be some kind of a summary of everything we've said today, so we need to listen to him. So Richard, the virtual floor is yours. Hello.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here today for Masters in Robots 2020 and this opportunity to speak with all of you about some of the possible futures of humanity and technology. Today, I want to talk with you about one of the most amazing partnerships of all time, humanity and technology. We would not be the species we are today without technology by our side. Similarly, technology requires our hands and our minds in order to exist, to reproduce, to evolve. As technologist Kevin Kelly has famously said, we are the sex organs of technology. But this may not always be the case. What happens when technology no longer needs us, or when it no longer serves humanity, but works against us instead? Could that day be arriving sooner than we think? Is it already here? To understand where I'm going with this, we need to take a big step back in time. From the moment of the Big Bang, the universe has been getting cooler, thinner, running down. This is due to the processes of thermodynamics and entropy. It's a relentless pattern that causes the cosmos to become increasingly disordered. But this doesn't happen uniformly. Along the way, pockets of order and complexity develop, leading eventually to the emergences we call life and intelligence. The reasons are involved, but this is largely because those configurations that can best replicate and perpetuate themselves will eventually overwhelm random and less fit configurations and outcompete them for resources. This is true whether that system is physical, chemical, biological, or as we will see, conceptual or technological. In order to achieve this, replication generally requires a system that is more complex than randomly occurring structures, thus perpetuating that system's continuation. Or to be more concise, success breeds success. In my new book, Future Minds, I explore the evolving nature of intelligence in the universe. Within the definition I've focused on, intelligence is an optimization that benefits a system or process, allowing it to perpetuate itself and maximize its future freedom of action. It doesn't need self-awareness or consciousness to achieve this. While mechanisms of such evolution are not always Darwinian, as we see in biology, they do follow similar patterns. Whether we are talking about autocatalyzing chemicals, national economies, or individual concepts and ideas, certain factors benefit their perpetuation and success, and those versions that take advantage of those factors get to continue into the future. In the case of concepts and technology, we are the vector, the means of their transmission, evolution, and spread. Technology doesn't need to intend to do any of this any more than a gene intends to produce antlers on an elk. The fact that it is propagated and carried forward, whether objectively, beneficial or not, is the determinant of its success. Leaping ahead several billion years, life on Earth has spread and diversified, filling every possible ecological niche. Not only this, but as life has developed, new niches have also been created, making possible still more configurations of life. This ultimately leads to an enormously intricate and interconnected ecosystem. Incidentally, this pattern doesn't just apply to our environment. It occurs in the metabolic pathways of a cell, the flows of a global economic system, or the cultural interactions of a society. Eventually, all of these progressions led to a not-too-distant relative of ours, a primate known as Australopithecus. Now, as animals and primates go, I'm sorry to say our ancestor was not particularly exceptional. About 3.5 feet tall, perhaps it was a tad more intelligent than a chimpanzee, but probably not a lot. Since it wasn't as fast or as strong as many of its predators, it was no doubt frequently eaten by some of the fiercer animals. But sometime about 3.5 million years ago, something amazing happened to our many times great-great-grandparents. Our ancestor discovered how to make stone tools, and this changed everything because this was the beginning of our coevolution with technology. Making stone tools through a technique known as stone knapping took a lot of effort, especially for an early primate. To learn it, and more importantly, to pass along and perpetuate the knowledge, would have been incredibly challenging. This was a new form of replication in the universe, the propagation of concepts, something that was virtual and non-physical, which was a tremendous shift from everything that had come before. Now, I call this relationship between humanity and technology coevolution very intentionally because even as we were developing these tools, they were doing the same to us, changing us, rewiring our brains, allowing us to promote knowledge through cultural transmission. I've written about this in Future Minds and elsewhere, so I'm going to speed ahead and say that all technology changes us, but most especially our brains. As a result, this unusual relationship slowly but surely transformed our species, leading eventually to Homo sapiens, modern humans, some 300,000 years ago. Several conditions came together around that time that led to a new and very important development: language. The shifting of the hyoid bone relative to our larynx or voice box occurred, as well as a mutation in the FOXP2 gene that has contributed to our ability to develop and use spoken language. Some of the brain regions that had developed over the prior 3 million years to promote the learning of self-control and the step-by-step sequences needed for stone knapping were co-opted within the brain, what's known in evolution as exaptation, to become the brain region known as Broca's area, which has been shown to be critical to language use. The newfound tool of language put us on the fast track of adaptation because it allowed us to begin manipulating and transmitting concepts, occupying what Tooby, DeVore, and later Steven Pinker called a cognitive niche. This allowed us to adapt and change far faster than any other organism in our environment. This was our secret weapon, which allowed us to achieve so much so rapidly. Of course, this has had its advantages and disadvantages, which we are becoming increasingly aware of. Now, this cycle, this positive feedback loop, has progressed to the point that today we're seeing the world rapidly becoming more and differently intelligent. More and differently intelligent. What exactly do I mean by this, and why is it happening now? Well, as we know, we've been developing technologies that emulate human processes for quite some time. Initially, this was mostly in the form of supplementing muscle and manual labor, but this has increasingly extended to more intellectual activities as well. This has become even more apparent since the beginning of the artificial intelligence era, which began in the middle of the 20th century, about 65 years ago. Since then, we've seen programs and systems become increasingly capable of performing tasks that we once thought could only be performed by people. Logical proofs, chess and checkers, conversational interaction. Some of these programs even progressed to the point of exceeding the best human performances. Famous examples include the defeat of world chess champion Garry Kasparov by the supercomputer Deep Blue in 1997, the 2016 defeat of Go champion Lee Sedol by Google's AlphaGo, and in 2019, a poker bot beat 6 of the world's top players at Texas Hold'em. But as amazing as these milestones are, computers don't achieve them in anything like the way we do. They use very different processes, neural networks, minimax algorithms, and flawless digital memory. As a result, our tools have become increasingly amazing at doing what once could only be done by a person, but they achieve it very, very differently. From the early days of rule-based symbolic AI to today's neural networks, the field of artificial intelligence has grown tremendously, though nowhere near as rapidly as many of its advocates had once hoped. Now, AI's third wave is working to advance the field still further. In recent years, research labs and institutions have been developing the next generation of AI tools, where the first wave's symbolic AI described and the second wave's connectionist AI categorized. This third wave seeks to make it possible for AI to explain. Focusing on the abstract thinking and reasoning we perform so naturally, this next phase is working to give AI the ability to reason, to have contextual understanding and common sense, to understand cause and effect, and to be able to learn from limited input by drawing on prior knowledge, much as a young child does. Why are they doing this? Because it will lead to far more powerful and useful tools for our increasingly complex world. Of course, we should expect this to lead to new difficulties as well. Nonetheless, this third wave will see AI surpass us in so many more ways. This next phase will probably go on for decades, and as it does, more and more feedback loops will allow AI to advance and perpetuate itself. While it will still need human hands, minds, and economics to drive it for some time to come, it will also become increasingly capable and therefore increasingly valuable to us. Will this one day lead to the much vaunted singularity, that hypothetical moment in the future when rapidly self-improving programs give rise to an AI many times more intelligent than the entire human race? There are many reasons for and against such an event occurring, so maybe and maybe not. But if it does happen, we probably won't know about it until we're well in the middle of it. It's often been suggested that if we are to protect ourselves from such a development, it will be through our own rising to a higher level, becoming a far more intelligent species than we are today. Achieved through what has been called intelligence augmentation, this will involve the improvement of our own natural intelligence through technological means. I say will rather than could because we are already well on our way to making this a reality. For centuries, we have used technology to augment our abilities to interact with and influence the world. Spoken language, the written word, libraries, media, the internet, smartphones, and so on. Though it may rub some people the wrong way, we are already a biological-technological hybrid, much as we've seen described between the covers of science fiction stories for many decades. This is a path we've been on for a very long time, and there's no sign we'll turn back anytime soon. While smartphones and other technologies have contributed to our becoming a hybrid species, there are other interface technologies that will take this still further in the coming decades. The smart glasses and smart lenses that will become prevalent during the next 2 decades will certainly promote this, but ultimately it will be the brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, that complete the most intimate connection between these two long-term partners, ourselves and our machines. Now, before you go thinking this is going to turn all of us into the Borg or some hive mind organism, keep several things in mind. Though we've had BCI demonstrations of simple communication wheelchair and robotics operations, sending messages on Twitter, and even video game playing. This technology is a long way from seeing mass market use. Nevertheless, over time, BCIs will become a very widely adopted technology. What seems unwieldy and even dehumanizing today will in time become imperceptible, essential, and perhaps even fashionable. But until then, many ethical issues will stand in the way because we're talking about putting something very foreign inside of our skulls. Therefore, it's safe to say that when it comes to people, this kind of technology will only be used for therapeutic purposes for many years before it ever sees widespread elective use. But that day is coming, and when BCIs do become commonplace, the ways we interact with our world and with each other will change very dramatically. Perhaps we will one day see this as being as significant as our acquisition of language itself. We will have access to information and abilities that would have seemed superhuman to our ancestors. In time, it could even lead to the next stage of human evolution, and as the centuries progress, we may discover that we have become a very different species. Now, some people may wonder, why would anyone want a BCI, or many of the technologies I'm talking about tonight? After all, we've managed just fine without them for many millennia. But of course, everything changes once someone else has access to a new technology and starts using it, when it's in their hands, but not yours. Recall that when computers and cell phones and smartphones first came out, many people didn't see the point. But as these tools became more widespread and the technologies matured, they conveyed more than just status. They gave their users an advantage, and that advantage grew to become a bigger advantage still. It got so not having a cell phone or a computer would hinder you in your job, in your relationships, and in society in general. Because all of the aforementioned technologies augment us. They make us more efficient. They give us access to information and resources that would be impossible to get otherwise. They make us more competitive in a world that is most certainly not standing still. Unfortunately, while these technologies give us all kinds of new abilities, they also lead to new vulnerabilities as well. The nature of our increasingly intelligent devices, combined with their access to the internet, mean they can be hacked, and brain-computer interfaces will be no different. After all, as an interface, these are a means of communicating with our resources and with each other. You know how serious it can be when your computer or phone is hacked, or those of the businesses and financial institutions you deal with. So ask yourself, how serious is it going to be when it becomes possible to hack your BCI, to hack your brain? Again, this sounds like science fiction, but the proof of concept work has already been done. All kinds of medical devices that connect to or are even implanted in bodies have been shown to be vulnerable to hacking. Why should BCIs be any different? Which raises the question, what safeguards will we need to protect ourselves? What kinds of filters and detection and remediation will it take to keep us safe? All of these advances may contribute to a world that we are poorly suited for dealing with. Despite our unique position occupying our world's cognitive niche, we actually aren't all that great at dealing with large amounts of data. This is becoming even more apparent as our lives are bombarded with new information every day from every direction. We evolved with a range of skills that allowed us to scavenge for food, remember places, identify people, recognize social cues, and spot patterns in our environment. Unfortunately, this also left us with many cognitive biases that have become increasingly apparent in the modern era. Biases that not only skew our decision-making, but which can be leveraged by others who seek to exploit us. Because we evolved to recognize patterns in the environment, one particular vulnerability we face today is apophenia, the tendency to mistakenly find connections and meaning between unrelated things. This is the basis of conspiracy thinking and a problem we increasingly face in our modern world. Our readiness to find patterns where none exist can lead to enormous personal and societal strife, and we are just as vulnerable whether those cues occur by happenstance or have been created by others. Combine this with forms of AI that are not only extraordinarily good at mining patterns from data, but are capable of manufacturing new patterns as well. As AI's third wave matures, giving it new but different variations on abstract reasoning, what unique risks and exploits might we have to face? How many new ways can our behavior be algorithmically influenced? In the past few years, we've seen our perception of reality undermined by the creation of images, video, voices, and even articles, people and ideas that don't exist. They are nothing more than the output of generative adversarial networks, of AIs. As our world becomes increasingly virtual, something most of us have experienced this past year, who and what will we be able to trust? What new social conventions will we be forced to adopt to ensure the person, the friend, the family member we are communicating with is who they say they are? Technology is not neutral, and all technology does bring with it new opportunities and challenges. As new advances lead to new risks, it is incumbent on us to plan, to prepare, and when necessary, to wisely regulate. Our rapidly changing world still needs us, and we still need technology. It is up to us to find solutions to the problems we have created so we can live in the kind of world and future that we deserve and prefer. Thank you, and be safe. Thank you. I know there has been an enormous amount of information to think about and discuss from today's sessions. I wish you all safety, health, and a fantastic future. Thank you.